Okay, turn in your Bibles to Romans, the 14th chapter, as we continue in the book of Romans. Romans, the 14th chapter, has been dealing with the subject of the day. The subject of the day. What day should they keep? We went into somewhat the doctrine of the Sabbath day. To Israel, freedom demanded rest for the body. Freedom demanded rest, and God gave them rest for their body because freedom demands rest. One of the great reasons for the Sabbath day was because of freedom. Freedom to rest, 1 out of 7. And had to do with thinking when the body isn't functioning, but thinking on the Sabbath day. We have gone into that. We will not reiterate it, but it is important. It'll come up from time to time throughout your entire life by people that are Seventh-day Advents. And a Bible college student should know inside out, backwards and forwards, this doctrine pertaining to the Sabbath day. But in regarding the day, these people were not liberals. They were not lascivious in their lifestyle. But on this particular subject, they were not including the Lord. Do you know that a number of ministries throughout the winter months and the summer months, that's 2 times a year, when it gets difficult in the winter, and when it's difficult in terms of the weather is so good, you've been through the winter, and everybody gets careless. Not everybody, but many people get careless in the summer because of the beautiful weather, and of course they've been through a winter, and they get careless in the summertime. They talk on character, but the Lord isn't necessarily included. I remember a pastor told me once, he said he was a good pastor, he was a true pastor, he preached the truth all the time. A dear lady in his congregation gave him a note, and it said, "Your messages are good, but you probably do not realize it. For 3 weeks you have not included the Lord's name in your message." So occupied, he had not included the Lord's name in his message. Preached about the Lord, but he just didn't use his name for 3 straight weeks. You can preach character and not include the Lord. They were discussing the day to keep, but they were not including the Lord in it. It's kind of like a group of people at Laodicea, and that was addressing a group of people who were not liberals, they were not lasciviousness, they were not filled with lasciviousness, but they didn't include the Lord, and he couldn't get into the group there, the church. So we have to be very careful that we include the Lord, that we include the Lord in every single thing we do. I heard that story, and it was cute. True story of a little boy who was kind of a wild little kid. Killed a frog, beat the frog on the sidewalk, beat the frog until the frog died. He didn't know the pastor was visiting his mother. So he came in with the dead frog, said, "Mommy, I killed the frog." Saw the pastor, and he said, and he went home to be with the Lord. Oh boy. Better still, he said, "The Lord," and he saw the pastor, and he said, "And the Lord took him home, sir." But include the Lord in everything. That's the story behind this. Include the Lord in everything. It's quite a thing, really. Was this pastor in our ministry a number of years ago, and he was very legalistic. Even if he preached grace, he was legalistic. Even when he preached love, it was legalistic. Even when he preached anything, it was legalistic. He just pastors get in that rut sometimes. They just become legalistic. So an old gentleman passed him a note. This is a true story. It happened in 1985 to 86. 1985. An old gentleman passed him a note, eyeball to eyeball, and he said, note said, "Sir, I would see Jesus." The pastor went in, and he was a good man, and he wept. And he cried. He didn't react. The Spirit of God spoke to him through that gentleman's note, because he was a man with gray hair and kind and highly esteemed by him in the church. So the pastor began to really break in his sermons, and he was a broken vessel, and he communicated life, and he communicated love. And 1 month later, the old gentleman gave him another note. And that one said, "And we were glad when we saw the Lord." He said that did more for his life than anything else. He preached the truth. He preached the truth. He preached everything. You couldn't find a flaw in his doctrine. He just wasn't motivated by brokenness. He wasn't motivated by love. Well, this is so important. It's so very important, because here they are discussing the day. You can take these illustrations back to Hungary and have them be all fresh, and have them be all fresh, especially the one on the frog. But it's quite a thing. Do you think, in all honesty, a word that's been used many, many times by teachers in this ministry, do you think that in the next 4 years the Clinton administration's philosophy will probably be iconoclastic? How many think it will? Well, I think it will. I think it will. And I believe with all my heart. What? You know what that means. All of our teachers use iconoclastic. I don't mean to use words you don't understand, and yet I guess I will use some. Attacking cherished beliefs. Just say it back to me. Yes. Well, they're already attacking cherished beliefs, aren't they? 1986, he didn't believe in abortion. 1992-3, he did. That's attacking a cherished belief. And, it's strange how there's so much said on television today about racism. Now, all of us know that in our lifetime there has been terrible racism. On the other hand, we also know that, as far as I know, please, I may be ignorant, but isn't it a lot better? Isn't it a whole lot better? But don't you think that the media magnifies it to try to get something going? I'm sure more should be done. But I also think no matter what we're dealing with racists, we should consider the overall population too, don't you? Sure you do. I think we better figure out how many everybody should be loved, everybody should have opportunities, and everybody should be treated fairly. And that's so important. And it doesn't make 1 ounce of difference what one's race is, ever. But I was thinking, they were attacking the Boston Celtics up in Boston about racism. I remember in the 60s they had 5 players on the court and they were all black. And they hired the first black coaches. So I don't know, why are they attacking them, I don't understand it. Well, verse 8 of Romans 14, "For whether we live unto the Lord. Whether we die unto the Lord. Whether we live, therefore, or die, we are the Lord's." All right? That's so crucial. We are the Lord's. You know, I was thinking of when I first became a Christian. Up in Maine, it was at that time, years ago, there was a tannery. And it had, well, what you did, you put these hides in this huge tub. They were raw, thick, ugly-looking hides, all kinds of hides. And you put them in this thick tub, and it had acid and chrome, and they stirred it up, and you put the hides in the chrome. It was terrible. It had to have rubber boots. Oh, it was awful. Goodness sake, you'd have to shower and put on perfumes, and you'd smell yourself in the home even when you had your fingernails clean and everything was clean. It was horrible. But it was a living when you're a kid. And I was thinking, at that time, they were having us work 12 and 16 hours a day because we knew how to get the job done instead of hiring. You'd go in the dark, you'd come out in the dark. Your car would get bad. You'd have car trouble. And it got as high as 49 to 60 below zero. Up in Caribou, Maine, it was 78. I was listening the other day up at Caribou, Maine. It was 62 last Friday, round there. So you see, it's still up in Caribou. That's the place to go if you like cold weather. Just go to Caribou, Maine. But 20 to 30 below all the time during the winter months, all the time. The wind chill factor was horrible. Get up in the dark, work your heart out in that smelly, sloppy place. Turn on the radio, negative news. And turn on the radio, everything was negative. This is going to happen. This is going to happen. Everything was negative. Get up in the dark, come home in the dark, smell terrible, turn on the radio, everything was negative. The weather was so cold, your car was always acting up, wouldn't start in the morning, even though you had a nice battery and everything else like that. It was awful. You know, everybody had seeds of suicide. Only seeds, no real intention. So I thought, I'm saved now. The first week or two I got saved. I said, I'm born again, I'm saved. Boy, this is wonderful. I'm going to church and hear a wonderful message, be all built up and edify. I can't wait until Sunday. And I got in church, and what do you think he preached? Armageddon. Boy, that was depressing. This morning, we'll be mentioning 7 years before Armageddon on this particular subject here and that's the rapture. I wish he would have spoken on the rapture. Well, so there was all kinds of arguing. Verse 9, for to this end Christ both died and rose. That is verse 9 of Romans 14. For to this end, eis toitorga, for this purpose, object distinctly in view, Christ both died, aorist active indicative, literally died, and rose, kai anistomai, aorist active indicative, at a point of time, produced the action of dogmatically being risen, raised up from the dead, and revived. Aorist active indicative, he lived again, kai anazeo, he was restored, that that he might be Lord, that is, to rule over with total ownership and absolute propriety, and exercise dominion over both of the dead and living. Now that's a very beautiful verse. They were arguing about the day, what day to keep, foods to eat, those two subjects. The food that had been offered unto idols, sacrificed to idols, and the day to keep. But what Paul is saying, he is saying, wait a minute, Jesus Christ died and rose again to be Lord over the dead and to be Lord over the living. That's what he was saying. So he says, you stop being scandalous You stop being invidious. You stop maligning. And that's what they were doing. They were scandalizing each other. They were maligning each other. They were backbiting. And they had terrible, excessive pride. They were filled with an attitude of excessive pride and hubris and all kinds of negativity toward each other as you read the Isagogics. And Paul was watching them as they magnified this thing completely beyond what it should have been magnified. And they wasn't really interested at all in that was sacred. They were interested in who's right on the day. The Lord was not being included. Yet he's Lord over the dead, he's Lord over the living through resurrection, but he was not included. They didn't have any spirituality, neither did they have gusto, heart. They didn't have heart either. And it takes heart in order to function in these type of growing situations. So then he says in verse 10, but why, see, we've had this in the first 5 verses. Now he's coming right back to his theme. He's not going to leave his theme alone. But why dost thou judge thy brother? Or why dost thou set at naught thy brother? Why dost thou judge su de tai krino? Now, this is a present active indicative. They were continually producing the action of being invidious. They were continually scandalizing one another. The verb krino includes to condemn, to criticize. It also includes to censor, to pass a sentence upon, to express an opinion, to divide or separate and make distinctions because of opinions, to form a dogmatic mental judgment. All right? Why dost thou do that to thy brother? Ton adelphon su. Now, ton adelphon su deals with the son of the same mother, but came to include such relationship as fellow kinsmen, ethnic relationship, college associates, husband or wife, and it, of course, has a wide range of things that it includes. It describes anything paired or related. In the spiritual sense, adelphos came to refer to a fellow Christian or a brother in the Lord. So why dost thou judge thy brother? In the book of Acts, it is used over 30 times. Or why dost thou set at naught thy brother? The same verb is used in verse 3. Exu theneo. Exu theneo. E-X-O-U-T-H-E-N-E-O. Now, we have ikai sutai exu theneo. It's used here to mean to treat with contempt and then reject, to despise continually. So you see, this church had more than just common problems. Boy, I've been in situations like that. Always on the winning side. I said, I've been in situations like that. I said, always on the winning side. That's just what I said. Boy, where they actually despise you, where I looked to the right in the balcony and someone was running out their tongue. I prayed years ago that I'd go through everything the apostles did. If I ever had it do over again, I would never pray like that. One more thing I got. I don't have a martyr's complex. Everything's going great now, but Lord, let's forget that. I appreciate all you've done, but let's forget that last one. No, really, I would rather be in, I don't ever care to make the Fox's Book of Martyrs. What's that book that records what all the athletes do? Yeah, I'd rather be in that book. At least this morning, that's how I feel. I'm sure that if you're honest, you're willing to do it if God wants you to, but you'd rather not be in the Fox's Book of Martyrs. I'm sure you're not saying, Lord, put me in the Fox's Book of Martyrs. But if it's your will, we'll go through it and you'll give me grace. But for now, let's settle for Guinness, did you say? The Guinness? Okay. So there was all kinds of contempt and rejection. And when those people sat up in the balcony, they were seated up in the balcony and they were running out their tongue. And I couldn't figure it out. I was preaching on Deuteronomy. And I guess the message, I remember it very plainly because you don't have that happen too many times in your life as a preacher. I was preaching on the Lord led them for those 38, 40 years to humble them. And this woman up in the balcony, Dr. Lewis and Kathy know who she was, and she went, they were going through a trial. She was against me, husband's against me. Her father was against me. And they were going to trial, and God wasn't providing, especially for the in-laws and parents at that time. And she was so mad that I said that there are times when God allows us to make choices, and he is in charge of the consequences of our choices. And when we make bad choices, he allows it to happen to humble us. Now, there's nothing very bad about that message. I took the that was right up there on the side of the balcony. So this is what I did. I just looked down here, just under her tongue. And I didn't see her tongue again the whole sermon. She raced out when I got outdoors and told me that was a false message. But when people get hating and despising, boy, they say anything. The heart gets wild because it's already deceitful. What can be expressed from a heart that's already deceitful? See? If a heart's already deceitful, anything can be expressed, right? I wondered, I said, is her heart damned, cursed, execrable? Is her heart gone? What's happened to her? By the way, when you say somebody's heart might be cursed, you're not saying they're going to hell. You're just saying what Jesus used the word curse many times for believers, including the Jews, who didn't honor him. It meant they would be robbed of being blessed. Grace was there, but it was not operating in behalf of their daily lives. That's what it means, that God was not out to bless them. Doesn't mean God's going to stand over them with a club ready to hit them. That would be possible, however, on given occasions, I would expect. Why dost thou judge, or set it not thy brother? See, I like exegeting because in this, if we just thought that this church just had a difference about days, they didn't have just a difference about days. They were really into it. There was hatred. There was venom. There was poison going on among believers. They hated each other over on the argument about the day and about food. It became terrible. The strong and the weak arguing and magnifying everything. Well, for we shall all stand before Pantes, P-A-N-T-E-S, gar, Paristemi, P-A-R-I-S-T-E-I-E-M-I, P-A-R-I-S-T-E-M-I, Pantes, gar, Paristemi is a future middle indicative. Now, remember the middle voice, subject producing the action on the verb, and in This case doesn't mean that the subject will necessarily benefit from the action of the verb, as it sometimes does. And I want you to notice it. It means stand. We all shall stand before the judgment seat of Christ. And this judgment seat is the bema seat of Christo, of Jesus Christ, of all believers in heaven. Now, as it is written, for as it is written, as I live, saith the Lord, every knee shall bow to me, and every tongue shall confess to God. So every one of us shall give an account of himself to God. Now, you know what I love about the bema seat judgment? Often you think of Philippians 2:10 as the white throne judgment alone, which comes 1,000, perhaps in 7 years, well, at least over 1,000 years later, of the unsaved. But here we're dealing with the bema seat, and in the bema seat, every knee shall bow to me. Think of the Christians who never bow their knees to God. They never go into prayer, and they will. They're going to bow down. Think of the Christians who will not make Jesus Christ their Lord, and they will, as I live, saith the Lord, every knee shall bow, and every tongue shall confess to God. See, this is where humiliation comes in. This is where the possibility of shame comes in just for a period of time in 1 John 2:27. Because people that haven't confessed the right things are going to confess. I'm not talking about sins. They're going to make, some of the negative people that are negative in ministries, they won't be negative at the bema seat. They're going to make some good confessions. It's going to be 1-to-1 to Jesus Christ. 1-to-1 with Jesus Christ. And they're going to confess that he is Lord, and they're going to confess on their knees. And this morning, in this particular subject, I'm talking about Christians. Some of these young teenagers that get off and won't get right with God, if they die, they'll make some, if they're saved, they're going to have to be really humiliated. It's not going to be their peers around them. Every single one must give a separate account of himself to God. And he'll be alone when he gives his account to Jesus Christ. All right? So that's what this is saying. Instead of confessing anxiety and negativity and depression and problems, they'll just confess Jesus Christ is Lord. That's the principle here. Okay. So we'll quickly exegete it, and I'm going into the doctrine of judgment, 7 of them. Now, here is, for we shall all stand then, as a future middle indicative, the judgment seat of Christ. Now we get into verse 11. For it is written, perfect passive indicative of grapho, to write. Something that happened in the past that has binding results. Passive voice, you receive the action dogmatically of what is being written. As I live, zo ego, present active indicative plus the personal pronoun, the nominative case. The verb zeo can refer to physical life or refer to spiritual existence. When it is used of the spiritual life, it is joined with other words to help shape its meaning, such as being with or in Christ, with power, or so on. As I live, saith the Lord. Lego kurios, present active indicative, plus the masculine noun, the nominative case, being the main theme here. Every knee shall bow to me. Every knee shall bow to me. All right, the verb kempto means to bend, to bow, often used in relationships to worship, or Daniel's posture in prayer when he knelt 3 times a day and prayed in Daniel 6:10. It's used of the adversaries bowing at the feet in 2 Samuel 22:40. And every tongue shall confess to God is a future middle indicative. And so it's a future middle indicative of exomologeo, to confess fully. Homologeo means to specifically confess. Now we have an intensive form of the verb of homologeo, which means to be more intensive, to freely open and fully confess everything that is true about the Lord. So every one of us shall give an account of himself to God. So then, araun, A-R-A-O-U-N, it's two superordinating conjunctions here. The use of two superordinating conjunctions indicates that every word in this sentence is emphatic. So he's using two superordinating conjunctions to use that every single thing here is dealing with something that is emphatic. Every word in the sentence is emphatic. Every one of us. Hekastos hemon, masculine singular adjective, nominative case, personal pronoun plus the plural. The superlative use of hekas. Every one. In the singular with the plural Haman, each particular one, Hamon, each particular one shall give an account. In the second sense of the word locus, the sense of counting or specific account in details, mental activity to reckon or explain, used in the general stress of Christians' accountability, refers to speech clarification of something. Every single one will give an account of himself. Parahealto is a masculine pronoun in the genitive case. He himself and no other. He himself and no other, emphatic use. To God, to theo, masculine noun, dative case. All right? The theo translates the Hebrew words Elohim and Yahweh. Now, here's the principle. Women emphatically alone give an account, with no husband anywhere near them. Where he'll be, I'm not sure. He will give an account. Women must learn the doctrine of the Bema seat. She emphatically alone has to give an account of her personal relationship to doctrine, her personal relationship to Jesus Christ, her personal relationship to faith and to the attributes of God through grace, her personal relationship to the local assembly. She must give emphatically a single individual account alone. And she can't say, honey, what should I say? Honey, what should the answer be? God will be her honey right there. And God will emphatically ask the questions. And she will emphatically bow her knee before him and confess to him in utter humility. I hope it'll be a joy, and I think it will be for many of you. But I just want to tell you what it's going to be about so you can do it with joy and not with shame. Some of these women teachers that go around teaching 1 Peter 3 until it's coming out of your ears. All they do is teach 1 Peter 3, 1 Peter 3. They don't act like there's any other verse in the Bible. Submit, 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 submit. Goodness sake, if I was a woman and I wasn't submitting, that wouldn't help me. I'd need more than one word to convince me. I'd need love and investment and impartation of life. Of course you honor your husband. Of course it's crucial. And of course rebellion is devastating in a wife's life or marriage. Of course that's correct. And of course it should be honor and honorable submission. But you don't teach that alone. You teach all the other doctrines to go with it. Like the doctrine of having your own vertical, like the doctrine of your own believer priesthood, like the doctrine of not agreeing with him if he's wrong, or if he gets off. You don't go along with it lest you get his judgment. You're kind to him, you still serve him, but you don't go along with him when he's in error. That's the balance that these women don't teach. That's why, thank God for our ladies here, and I'm proud of them, and I can say that anytime, any place, anywhere. they don't get off in their teaching. But people that don't have a strong local assembly and a strong pastor teacher, and they get teaching in Bible studies, and they're the most dangerous things in the world. No one can be as dangerous as an influential woman that's a good speaker that gets a group of new women out, and she takes over the platform as their pastor, while she refers to another pastor that they never see. And then she teaches. Today, we'll teach from 1 Peter 3. 6 weeks later, 1 Peter 3. Woman wrote me the other day, and she said, I go to a Bible study, and all I hear over and over and over again is 1 Peter 3. Well, I thought there was a lot more than 1 Peter 3 to women's pertaining to submission. Furthermore, that woman doesn't know a thing about the isagogics of Surah. If she did, she'd be a little ashamed to use that chapter. It was easy for Surah to get right at 86. God honored her by getting her pregnant at 90. If Jesus permits me on a good, joyous, it's all going to be joy and fun in heaven anyway. It's going to be sacred, holy, wonderful worship, praise, service, fun. But I would ask him, can you just bring in, it won't be audio, video, any of that stuff. It'll be Jesus Christ doing it just the way it was in person, because there is no time in eternity, so he'll just turn on an eternal switch, and that will be just as it was then at that specific hour. But I would love to see how wrinkled she was, how old she was, how strange she acted. If her back was bowed down, I'd like to see Sarah's condition when she was having the pregnancy. And I would imagine that all these young 15, and by those days they married at the age of 14, I was wondering, the 14-year-olds, the 20-year-olds, 25-year-olds, and here's this 90-year-old woman. I must have been quite a day, whatever kind of a place it was. All right? You've had your Isaacs, so don't get any ideas. Now, let us not, therefore, judge one another any more, but judge this rather, that no man put a stumbling block or an occasion to fall in his brother's way. Now, this present active is subjunctive. You may or may not judge, but he's suggesting we don't. Don't condemn, don't censor. Don't separate and make distinctions. Don't pass a sentence. Don't give your opinion on a private matter because of your background, your experiences, and your social environment. Don't form a mental judgment against anyone any more. Maketai Elios. Meketiallelous. Alilos. And it means no longer, no further. It's a combination of the negative particle may and the adverb, which means to yet or still. It is used in the moods of possibility, the subjunctive, sometimes in the imperative. But judge this rather, aorist active imperative, here's a mandate. Judge this rather. Krino includes making a mental decision here, a determination that no man put to me tithmai, present active infinitive. Have this be your purpose continually in your attitude. Set this in your mind for good. A stumbling block. Anything that would cause a scandal. Scandalon appears once in reference to a military defeat in Daniel 11:44. Other times it's a sense of a snare or a trap. Usually it's linked to sexual desires or difficulties or wealth, or the snare of idolatry, or an occasion to fall. Occasion to fall. Don't cause someone to fall. Don't Don't produce something where they'll enter into the act of falling. Don't say something through an offense where the result will be they will fall. In his brother's way is not in the original text. In his brother's way is not in the original text. In his brother's is. So, what an amazing statement this is. God is saying, don't do a single thing. You know, there's a lot of new people that are coming in this ministry. How easy it would be to put a stumbling block in front of their way, to cause them to fall. The result of what you say, somebody falls. What you say produces the action for them to fall. See? The Bible says, do not do that. Be careful who you share things with. What you share with people that don't have a capacity is going to hurt them. Don't go telling your problems to everyone around you. That's not in the Bible. Tell them to God or some leader, but don't tell them to everybody, because what you say, even though it doesn't relate to them, can cause them to stumble. Putting a stumbling block in somebody's way is a devastating thing. Quickly, in closing, the major judgment of history. The first judgment was Jesus Christ on the cross. What year did he die? He was 36, but what year was it? What? 30 AD. Thank you. Okay, 2 Corinthians 5:21, 1 Peter 2:24, and 3:18. The second judgment in the Bible is self-judgment. 1 John 1:9, 1 Corinthians 11:31. In the Old Testament, Psalm 32:5, 51, 1-5 in the Psalms, and Isaiah 43:25-28. When the believer judges himself, examines himself, self-judgment by the believer, naming his sin and recovering from it through the blood of Christ. That's the second judgment. The third judgment is at the Bema seat of Jesus Christ, the judgment seat of Christ, church-age believers, to judge the believer's work, evaluation, or production, winner or loser, at the Bema seat of Christ. 1 Corinthians 3:11-16, Romans 14:10, after the rapture, the rest of the believers, Revelation 11:18, the Old Testament prophets and saints, to the saints and the tribulation saints, and the millennial saints. So, the Bema seat, after that, rest of the believers. There'll be other judgments for the believers that will not be at the Bema seat. Only the church-age believers will be at the Bema seat. The Old Testament prophets will not. The saints of the tribulation will not. And the millennial saints will not be there. So remember, those judgments differ. Judgment of the living Jews at the second advent. The judgment of the living Jews at the second advent. Not rapture, advent, Mount Olivet. Baptism of fire. Illustration. 10 virgins, Matthew 25, 1-13. Parable of the talents, Matthew 25, 14-30. Ezekiel 20, 22-30. The wheat and the tares, Matthew 13, 34-30. Unbelievers cast off the earth. Believers continue into the millennial reign. That's at the second advent judgment, the Jews' judgment. Then the earth will be totally burnt with fire before the millennial reign begins. When it starts out, it will have a perfect environment. For 1,000 years, it will not continue to be perfect, even though Jesus Christ will be reigning perfectly, but the environment itself will not continue to be perfect, though once again it will start out that way. Judgment of the living Gentiles at the second advent. Baptism of fire. Judgment. Goats. Matthew 25, 31-46. Unbelievers. Matthew 24, 37 to 41, analogy to the days of Noah. That's the judgment of the living Gentiles at the second advent, when the goats are on this side and the sheep are put on this side. Gentiles, many will be saved, many will not be saved. Judgment of nations. Judgment of nations is included in that second advent. Judgment seat of fallen angels is the sixth judgment. Matthew 25:41, cast into the lake of fire forever. At the end of the millennial reign, Revelation 28 through 10. Judgment of unbelievers, Revelation 20:11 to 15. All believers, unbelievers are resurrected, like John 5:28 says, and judged according to their human good, and then cast into the lake of fire because they rejected Jesus Christ. So there is your 7 judgments. We've included some in one of those judgments that will be several. The prophets, the saints, and the millennial saints, their judgment is different. All right? Now, blessed are those that take part in the first resurrection, says Revelation 20. We'll be in the believers' resurrection, and the Bema Seat judgment will take place after that. Now, in closing, in 5 minutes, now that we've dealt with the judgments, the content of this passage, starting with verse 4 and verse 13, is stop judging. Now, this is why judging is repudiated, and Jesus Christ says don't do it. If you quickly turn to 3 passages in the Old Testament very quickly, and I'm going to read them to you from the Amplified Version, which is only a translation, just like King James is. King James is a good translation, perhaps a better one, but it was still a translation. Okay, if you've turned to Proverbs 26. Proverbs 26. What's our subject? Christians judging one another, pertaining to the day, pertaining to food offered to idols, despising each other, hating each other, maligning each other. 26:22 Amplified. The words of a whisperer, a slanderer, are like dainty morsels, or words of sport to some, but to others are like deadly wounds. They go down into the innermost part of the body for the victim's nature. Now, in the original, it says, they go into the soul and cause the receiver to die spiritually. I remember a long time ago we had an illustration of this. If A gossips to B, and B doesn't believe it but listens to what A says, B doesn't believe it, but they listen to what the evil report is. The eggs of the serpent go into the memory center and unconscious mind of B. Now, someday, B will die spiritually because he listened. Someday. Death is already in him, waiting to happen in a trial at the church. He will take sides because of those eggs. When he hears it, he doesn't believe it. But he wasn't supposed to hear it. God will take care of it, and he's not in the table of organization. So we have this business of these deadly wounds going down into the soul. Deadly wounds. Proverbs 18:8. The words of a whisperer or a talebearer are as dainty morsels. They go down into the innermost part of the body. So, see, these things, these are fiery darts from Satan. That's why husbands cannot speak satanic words to their wife, and their wives can't respond with evil words to their husband. The reason that marriages become so terribly incompatible is because there's all kinds of eggs toward each other that was sown by Satan. And people spoke words that didn't even come from them. The words came from Satan, and the words they speak go into the other one's emotions, and the other one never ever fully recovers from it if they keep getting it all the time. So both parties become representatives of Satan toward each other, and outside the house they're okay. But they poisoned each other's subconscious minds toward one another through satanic eggs. And sooner or later, as problems mount in the marriage, the eggs hatch. And then comes the divorce and the excuses and the reason, and Satan did it all with the consent of their free volition. Proverbs 20:19, he who goes about tale-bearing reveals secrets. Therefore, associate not with him who talks too freely. Do you hear what that said? You don't hang around somebody that's sharing you secrets. Even if it's Judas, who was Jesus Christ's disciple for 3 years, and he happens to become your friend, and you don't know he's Judas, and you don't go out with him and say, boy, I heard something today from one of the big boys right near him for 3 years. That's what some of you do. Just if you didn't know he was Judas, you'd go out with him, he'd become your best friend, you'd say, he can't be wrong. He walked with him for 3 years, but he was wrong. He was the devil. To listen to Judas just because he'd been a disciple of Jesus would have been evil. And many did listen to him. He even infected Peter. You don't listen to anyone that wants to tell you secrets about another believer. You understand that? It is deadly. B will spiritually die. By the same token, you do not listen to negativity towards yourself from the air. If you receive negativity towards yourself from the air, death is already working in your soul toward you, against you. You are dying while you're serving. Jesus Christ didn't say, by how many vineyards you have, and I'm going to preach a message on that, you will know you. He said, by your fruit. You know, a ministry can have 15,000 outreaches and not be spiritual. A Christian can serve God in the mission field, not be spiritual. It isn't how many vineyards you have, it's how much fruit you have. It's fruit, not vineyards. You can have all kinds of vineyards that do not produce any grapes. You can say, planted this, taking this. See? Doesn't work. It's where's the fruit? So, do not let guard your heart, be a guardian of your soul. That's Proverbs 4:23. Guard your soul, episkopeo, Hebrews 12:15a. Let the Lord be bishop of your soul, 1 Peter 2:23. And don't let dots go into your subconscious, your unconscious, or your emotions. Don't let them, because the purpose is to bring death into your spiritual life. Father, dismiss us in Jesus' name. Amen.